Hey everybody, this is Brian Aiello. On episode number 60 of Origin Stories on Creativity, I spoke with Adam St.Pierre. He is a Torontoian. Is that a word? Torontoian. I'm not even quite sure. But people who live in Canada are quite nice. I really enjoy having conversations with them. I enjoy having conversations with everybody who considers themselves an artist or a content creator. Mr. St. Pierre has written himself a novel. He has called his novel Stellar Drift. He is looking to make 30 sales, and I guess actually he's made that. So he's made his goal on Inkshares. Inkshares is interesting. They help you out. Inkshares is a great little website that I've not really actually explored. I checked out Wattpad. I have some fiction on there. I started a Inkshares account. I really haven't done anything with it though. I've just been so busy, writing short fiction and trying to build up this second novel. I'm really disappointed with the first novel. I'm going to have to go back into it and do another rewrite. It's going to have to happen, unfortunately, eventually one day. I mean, everything is constantly in the works, being developed. That's one of the problems, isn't it? Just constantly reworking. I'm thinking about Hemingway and his typewriter. I mean, how hard could that have been? How do we even call ourselves writers nowadays with the constant? I mean, it's so easy. Point and click with the mouse, punch in some letters, and move on. It was so permanent back Hemingway's day, and he wrote perfect fiction. You can't go back into Hemingway's stuff and edit it at all. It's just mind-blowing. But Hemingway was not on my podcast. Adam St. Pierre was. And as I stated, he was a magnificent conversationalist. I was sick when I spoke with him on Saturday. I was not feeling good at all. He put up with it. There's some coughing, unfortunately, on the podcast. I did have some technical issues as well, maybe some roboting. He's Canadian. He was so polite, he didn't point it out to me. And there might be some garbling along the way. I apologize for that. Hopefully it's dealable and we can move past it, and we will get those technical issues ironed out going forward. Otherwise, here is Adam.
My father's side, his family's from Quebec, and then I'm actually from the East Coast. We're from Prince Edward Island,
Oh, okay.
and then so I've been
Canada.
living in Toronto for about a year now.
Oh man, I'd love living in Canada right now. I'm so jealous of you guys.
But
Seems so nice and liberal up there. I've been a few times.
yeah,
Managed to see Niagara. What's that?
the whole Trump business is not it's not so fun down there these days.
Yeah, man, it's not it's funny. It's funny, it's hilarious. I mean, it's so horrible. I don't know what's gonna happen. I mean, I guess history is filled with stuff like this, right? I mean, you don't know what's gonna happen, and then when it does happen, you can point and laugh and say, "Oh man, I wish we knew." Oh man. The sad thing is you're in it with us no matter what. I mean, if something horrible happens, you're gonna hold our hands right into the history books. So it's just
Yeah, we're
unfortunate.
getting dragged into it with this NAFTA stuff now. I was actually just reading the football news today about the football controversy and stuff. So I'm interested to see what happens on Sunday in response to all this. But yeah, no, it's nothing. It's nothing if not funny. But yeah, I'm glad I'm not in the U.S. I'll just say that.
What is well, Toronto just had just an interesting politician too just die. What was his name? Rob Ford?
Rob Ford, yeah, and he is kind
Yeah.
of like the prelude to Trump. He kind of has the same manners of he's just kind of like a crazy drunk guy. Definitely more on the just unpredictable, psychotic day-to-day level than Trump. Trump is at least kind of like you can kind of maybe predict what he's doing. He's just kind of egotistic. But Rob Ford was just a heavy drinker. That's all he was.
He could talk though. I heard a little bit of a speech that he made about some comments made towards him, and he could really kind of ramble off and say some stuff. He died of
Oh yeah,
cancer, right?
yeah. He died of cancer. He was definitely a big populist. Like he has a lot of support among sort of the outlying communities and sort of lower income people. I mean, he did a lot for his community in his time, and he obviously garnered a lot of loyalty and support that kind of pushed him up into that mayor position. But yeah, he
Lower
just
income, man. That's the funny thing, isn't it? It's like everybody's lower income nowadays.
mm, yeah,
It seems
and
like it anyway. I mean, there aren't very many rich people, and the rich people aren't really hobnobbing with the poor.
well, I think that's it. It's more so these days it's a big inequality, right? The In Canada we still have a bit of a middle class. I understand it's kind of on the way out, but they're always trying to kind of prop up the middle class. But there's less of that nowadays. It's definitely more polarized between lower income and higher income. And you
Yeah.
see that in the U.S., you see that here in Canada.
Yeah, we don't really have a middle class anymore. They're going away. Seems like anyway. I mean, I don't know where people are getting their money at, and it's hard. If you go out, if you go to like Appalachia, and you see people driving cars, you kind of wonder where they're getting their money from.
Hmm.
It's
I mean,
interesting. I
yeah,
mean,
and I mean the big Canada story in Canada these days between the big cities is foreign investment. I mean, you just have a lot of
yeah,
foreign money coming in, and you see it particularly in. I lived in Vancouver for a bit actually, and Vancouver has such a visual disparity between sort of wealth and kind of poor neighborhoods, right?
it's
It's just a
interesting.
really interesting contrast that you see in that city.
And you don't see a lot of businesses in this in between. You have Vancouver; it's gigantic. It's a big metropolis. You have where you are in Toronto. It's a gigantic metropolis. It's beautiful, but what's in between? You know what I mean? There's
Mm.
roads. You can get on those roads. You can travel between the big cities, but get off. You have gas stations. You might have a couple restaurants, but there's nothing in between. And
Yeah,
it's
no, it's
sad and really depressing. There's
Canada's
crime. There's drugs.
yeah.
I
Canada's a big drive-through country. Lots of rural area for sure.
Yeah, we've got the same situation here. I was reading about your science fiction novel, at least the one that's coming out.
Mhm.
You talk about a generational ship,
Yes,
right? What is your book called?
Stellar Drifts is not is the title.
Stellar Drift, and you're done.
I'm wrapping it up. I'm coming onto the edge of it now. I like things are sort of mapped out already, but I just have to sort of wrap up some of the last chapters of it. Yes, it's on the way.
How does the world that we live in now play into this novel that you've written, or does it at all? Are you fantasizing about a world that kind of is an escapist reality, or are you kind of playing into a world that kind of mirrors the one that we're experiencing down here? This
I mean,
nasty, polluted
I think it definitely
climate.
taps in. I think it pulls in a lot of interesting like ideas of. I mean, it's more so about kind of old notions or old traditions kind of breaking down, and it's there's these kind of institutions that exist in the ship, but the institutions have kind of worn thin, and they're at that sort of breaking point. And there is kind of a shift in the novel where there's a new power coming in, and there's supposed to be a kind of transition within the ship happening. Uh, that's sort of visible in the way of the power is kind of shifting the ship, and like who has control in the ship is sort of is kind of a big major point of the novel. So I mean, if you kind of compare it to what we were talking about in terms of Trump and the current political moment, I mean,
Hmm.
there's lots of that happening, and I mean, all of that is sort of set on top of the big mystery of the ship is kind of really explore the underbellies of it. So the idea is like what's down there and kind of how is that maybe bleeding into what's happening into the everyday of the ship. I mean, that's just kind of that concept of the unknown, the uncertain, the kind of terror aspect of it. I think that comes into it a lot too.
Also, you're writing kind of a horror science fiction novel as well.
Yeah, it's touching more on existential or like gothic horror. That's kind of what I'm trying to bring into it. I read a lot of gothic horror a couple of years ago. I was really sort of inspired by adapting some of those themes and kind of trying to bring that into a science fiction sphere. And I
Hmm.
know it's been done in like sort of the more upper level kind of Warhammer and things have touched on that kind of aesthetic. But I was trying to go for more of the kind of like just the tension and kind of the lead. There's like a separation between horror and terror, right? And I'm trying to touch more on that terror aspect, the feeling of kind of like uncertainty and not knowing.
Uh-huh. That's very interesting. So your ship is separated by classes then. There's stuff happening above that's disconnected from below.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's classes within classes, certainly. There's always hierarchies, and I think that's an important thing to kind of draw out or distinguish, especially when you're kind of building a world and building like a society. You're trying to map that out for people, and there's always going to be sort of classes of people, right? Distinctions. So there's the academic class, there's this sort of leader caste, and then there's kind of the holds, which are like these almost like the settlements, and they're kind of just disparate. They do their own thing. They kind of almost self-governing. But yeah, they're definitely sort of that, just kind of more like the tribal class of workers and such. And then there's an obvious sort of like outlying element of people who don't fit into any of those things, and they sort of find themselves wandering around in the dark, essentially outside of, I guess, what civilization is, and they kind of have their own kind of class.
You kind of have to, with a generational type of spaceship, are they heading someplace, or they just live on a spaceship?
That's kind of the concept, is they don't really know. We come into the novel like there's been a couple hundreds of years of society before these people, and the history even before then is sort of not certain. So they know they're on a ship, they know their environment, and they know that things are powered and kind of moving, but they don't know necessarily where it's going or kind of what it's doing. And the idea of, is there a destination, like is there an endpoint, it comes into it, because it's sort of this mystical concept of the destination. It's like, where we're going to end up, and that's used to sort of give people hope in a lot of ways. But whether that's an actual thing, and whether sort of this governing body knows of a destination, that's kind of again, it's another point that kind of gets broken down in the novel.
So they didn't even know where they're from.
Realization, maybe. Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting.
No, they don't even know where they're from. That's the main thing.
So how many generations have they been on the ship? They didn't even know that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's I would want to think of it more as sort of it's like post-apocalyptic sci-fi on a ship, essentially, right? So the society that is on a ship doesn't even know like where it came from or what its original mission was. Like no one really knows what's happening on the ship. They're just kind of living out their lives. It is well beyond the sort of stage where people are accepting of their lives on the ship, and they're just sort of living things out. So there's a very flourished sort of low-tech society on the ship that relies on the ship and kind of salvages things on the ship and kind of feeds it all back into society. But when the control they have over the ship is very nil.
It's a fascinating idea. I mean, just the idea of this ship that's been out in space so long that they've not only lost contact with who they are as a species, but their own history as well. I'm looking at the log line of the archaeologists kind of making a grasp for power, and what is it? Historians kind of, trying to figure out who they are. I mean, it's so fascinating. And I talked to somebody, I don't know who it was, the subreddit that I kind of bumped into you on, the science fiction writers. I constantly throw fiction up there, and I don't know who it was. I mean, maybe it was you. I had this idea of this generational ship that's been out so long that they had just tacked on parts and pieces of the original ship was buried underneath tons and tons and tons of add-ons, to the point where it's just like this. Now, who knows? I mean, you can build so much in space, it doesn't even matter anymore. You don't have to be aerodynamically whatever. I like that you can have like thousands and thousands and thousands of years worth of construction projects.
Yeah, and I've always been kind of into that concept of like the sci-fi as ruins, or kind of the future as kind of the past in a lot of ways. Like what would be the future to us is still the past to someone else, right? So that's kind of what I tried to dive into with it. It's just
well, the idea of survival too. I mean, right? And you're trying so hard to survive. And who cares about where you're coming from when the future is kind of, we need to make sure that this, and that, and the other thing isn't going to blow up, right? And it's like, how do we make sure that we're surviving?
And
the tech has to work.
It's people on the ship are more concerned about their day to day and sort of their immediate surroundings, sort of yeah, the grander questions of who's driving the ship, where's the ship going. I mean, those things maybe leak into their day to day, but I don't think it's necessarily the pressing question when you have to eat or you have to just live.
Yeah.
You know.
The math of the asteroid, is it going to hit us? It's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
future. It's all tomorrow. It's not yesterday, because yesterday is already past. Yesterday is not going to haunt you as much as tomorrow is. And I
yeah,
love the
exactly.
idea of the future being more haunting than your yesterday.
Mhm.
That's a really good idea. I mean, it's a really good, who cares about the past? And this archaeologist is trying to figure it out. And I don't know what your novel is, but in my mind, that's what it kind of summons, is this thing that's been out there for so long that, like, wait a second, guys, who are we?
Yeah.
Does I mean, does the question ever get answered? Or does it matter?
Uh, and see that may not be a thing. I don't think it necessarily matters. Like the question does come up, and the novel touches on it a bit. We kind of go into that, and there's a sort of realization of kind of what was involved in the past, but there's been so much history on the ship now. It's kind of like, there's not really a sentence to sum it up. But yeah, that question of kind of where they originally came from does kind of come up, but it's not really the central answer, right?
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, the idea that sort of a lot of the heroes in the novel are sort of the main heroes are archaeologists. There's a lot of the heroes are sort of professors or kind of historians. That idea of kind of who controls the past or who manages the past and sort of who articulates the past and who presents it, right? That's kind of where the power lays, and I think that comes up a lot in the novel. Is it's yeah, exactly. Who's the one explaining the past to the people or presenting the past, and how are they structuring it? All that
Are
is
they
sort of
are
very
they
important.
deemed like obsolete? They're like a waste of time, or are they considered a power on the
Mhm.
ship?
And again, it's been so long that it doesn't really get into that because that whole original idea of like what their purpose is or kind of what they're doing on the ship, that's not necessarily touched on
Yeah,
because the ship has just been sort of going on for so long, it's so out there. So yeah, I don't think I would ever bring to the into the novel say, you know, they make contact with sort of with the original landing point or the original people who sent the note reach them. I don't think that's what the area
that's
to
not your
explore.
point.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely more about the internal politics of the ship and more touching on the people and sort of and it being in that horror space, touching on their own uncertainty and their own fear of not only what's in the ship but where they're going with the ship as
As a
well.
writer, though, man, you really piqued my imagination. I want to write your novel. As a writer, I'm like, oh, dude, let me throw some words into this thing. Do you get into religion at all?
There's a religious aspect, and that comes more so through, it's within in the opening chapter. You can read the opening chapter on the Inkshare space,
Oh, cool.
but the opening chapter touches on it more so with the concept of this overarching intelligence. So,
Hmm.
every ship has sort of this driving artificial intelligence, some kind of central automation system that's moving things.
You said every ship, so that means there's multiple ships in this colony.
Well,
It's
I mean,
not
no. This is one ship here, but even more generally is science fiction, right? So I try
oh,
to
okay.
play with that idea. So this ship here, it has its own sort of intelligence, or at least they know of an intelligence that exists on the ship, but it's been like dormant for well before they've been around, right? And it's more so they read documents, they've found documents that speak of this kind of central automation system, but they
Hmm.
haven't been able to reach it or kind of communicate with it. Yes, so there is a kind of element of religious there because there's people who believe it exists, people who don't believe it exists, that kind of thing.
How much science fiction have you written? Is this where your passions lie? Are you a science fiction author?
Yeah, definitely. It's always been kind of the genre I've gone to, whether it be sort of this kind of space stuff or more so just kind of closer to the ground, kind of tech or speculative fiction, I guess is what you call it these days.
Yeah,
But
speculative. Yeah.
yeah, but I've always been into that space. It's what I sort of read growing up. I'm very much into that. I love a lot of sort of Stephen King, sort of all the kind of early science fiction, and William Gibson was another big, inspiration of mine. So I'm very much into the science fiction aspects. Yeah,
How you feel about Cassini
Cassini. Yeah.
diving into Saturn? Yeah.
No, I mean that's very cool. I mean, it's very surprising how much emotion they can whip up over this
Right.
spaceship crashing into a planet. It's very funny to see, but I thought it was very cool. The images coming back were actually absolutely stellar. That's kind of my favorite part of it. Is just these
You know what I was
colors.
disappointed about was the last one. I wanted like a better last photo from that satellite. Was hoping for something more dramatic than a blurry picture of what moon was it that it took a picture of this last. Can't
I'm not quite
remember
sure.
exactly. Yeah, Euripides or something like that.
Yeah.
But the last one was just a blurry shot of maybe it was crying or something. Yeah, people really got worked up over that satellite diving into Saturn. It's like,
Big emotional event, but even those like final images, it's kind of like looking through a keyhole at this grander thing going on. Like imagine actually sort of being where it was and tumbling as you were. Like you would have this feeling of such like immensity or kind of grandiose to it because yeah, if you're actually in the presence of Saturn, it's like this huge massive thing, right? You would feel that in a lot of ways. So but we only get that kind of keyhole sense of it. So
and the thought
it was
process
very
too was, hey, we could leave it as junk in space, or we could crash it into one of the moons, or we could do something else with it. And they were like, oh, well, let's not crash it into the moon. We might contaminate possible life,
yeah.
or we could do blah, blah, blah. No, let's just crash it into Saturn because we don't want to ruin something that might exist. It's
I
just,
thought that was very cool. I
yeah, it
mean,
was
it's like
fantastic.
they're planning for all the contingencies, right? It's long-term planning for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's just, and it was generational too, because I mean, in our lifetimes, we're probably not going to make it back to those moons. I mean, it's going to be a long time coming before another mission makes it to that area. It took
Yes.
decades. I mean, how long did it take? 15 years to actually crash that satellite into Saturn. It takes a long time to do anything up there.
Yeah, and again, I mean, going back to the novel, that's kind of again the idea is that these time scales in space are so much more immense. Like the
Mhm.
history is so much greater because it takes longer to do everything, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, even if we were to kind of send people to Mars, I think it's like what it's like an 8 month trip to Mars or something. Like,
8 months. Yep.
uh,
Something goes wrong in 8 months to get them back. God, that's why I love The Martian. I mean, the time scales
yeah, yeah.
of that novel, of that movie, were just immense. Something went wrong. I mean, they had to really plan for contingencies, and the contingencies were months to work around.
The Martian
Do
was really
you?
great because The Martian brought a lot of that sort of concepts into the mainstream and a lot of the sort of feeling of isolation stuff. I thought it got that sense across really well, is that isolation aspect and how long it
Isolation,
takes
yeah.
to do everything and like there's so much planning that has to go into it. I thought it got that across very well, and it was really good movie and book.
I mean, in terms of, I know, in terms of the human race, though, I mean, too, we've played with so much time since we started writing stuff down. Stick figures on the wall of Egypt and whatnot. The Rosetta Stone, Babylonians or whatever.
Mhm.
We've only been kind of writing things down for how many centuries or millenniums? I mean, not that long, honestly. When your spaceship leaves wherever it left from, were they not writing things down, or where did the records were not kept correctly, or how did they lose contact with their home planet?
Again, a lot of that is sort of in the history of it. Is not they don't really know. The only really connection that a lot of people have on the ship to their history is through kind of word of mouth oral history that gets passed down. And then a few of the professors in the ship, assembled in what's called the academy, and that's sort of one of the institutions that's breaking down. It's sort of this central authority over education and sort of passing on knowledge. They have access to sort of these old pages that are essentially transcribed knowledge of that were obviously kind of recorded in some other form than digital, just to be able to sort of pass down, right? And these kind of old pages contain just a lot of concepts, a lot of old technology, and a lot of the thoughts that aren't necessarily well known among the kind of general populace now, but are passed on through sort of tightly selected candidates and students to be moved into the professor role.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have a novel that I'm working on right now where I have an AI, this artificial intelligence that becomes sentient, and he
Okay.
starts the novel out right,
Hmm.
and basically throughout the novel he chimes in occasionally because he's the crux that kind of finishes things off. He's the ending. And what he does is when he becomes sentient, he starts eating his home planet for materials to build himself as big as possible. And in doing so, he's basically killing all these human-like humanoid type creatures.
Hmm.
And by eating the planet, he's destroying them, and he doesn't care because they're not like him. And when I was talking to this person on Reddit, I realized, some of them have to escape. And when I was just talking to you, it'd be so cool to have them escape, but they're so afraid of technology. They go into like a analog type system. They don't go into a computer type system. They are afraid of digital. They're afraid of computers. They go into like a system where they don't have shit like that. They don't have the materials necessary to have computers or whatever. Maybe something similar. You know what I mean? As an excuse, just spitball with you about why your people don't have the records or whatever, what brought them into space.
Yeah, and I mean that concept is really interesting in terms of the AI sort of eating yourself or having to like pick up all
I
that
love that
organic.
character. I love him so much.
Yeah, that'd be fun to play with. A lot going on there, but I mean especially for the people. I mean, if they're in that sort of mode of having to, or if they're afraid of technology or they won't use technology. I mean, that's kind of. I feel like you would have a lot of conflict that way if they suddenly had to escape this AI or just like to kind of propel themselves forward. If they sort of had to overcome that fear and kind of jump in a rocket ship quickly or sort of use some kind of technology to fight back. I mean, there's a
Well,
lot of kind of cool ideas.
we just know that
Hmm?
space travel is so technologically dependent. You know what I mean? It's just so hard. The math itself is so difficult. You see that picture of the mathematician standing by the reams of text, her equations just to
Oh,
send
yeah,
John Glenn to space and back again. I mean, it's incredible the amount of technology that takes to just do that one thing. It's amazing.
I
Or
mean,
to the
yeah,
moon
the
and
early
back.
space program is amazing to read about. Like, if you ever dive into sort of like the tell-alls and kind of biographies of people working that early space programs, the kind of stuff they could do with the middle amount of technology and just pure math is crazy. And like everything's done by hand, everything's sort of mechanical. There's not all these digital kind of processors around. So, I mean, yeah, it's very impressive that you were able to kind of put people in a box and send them to the moon
And
and
alive
keep
again.
that all
Because the
contained.
Russians didn't care about that. They would put them in a
Yeah,
box and say, bye,
yeah,
you come back again. There's some
there's
rumors that
such
they would send people up and not come, they wouldn't come back again. They just have so many doppelgangers. Hey,
yeah,
you look like him, you're not him.
yeah. But I mean, it's so amazing because it's such like an age of sail thing, right? There's a magic to the early kind of space program that was
Yeah.
very much like frontier and like Cavalier-esque, and it's just being to put a man in a box and kind of send him out. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know. You're hoping that your math works out. You're hoping all the mechanical pieces will push each other together and ignite the fuel tank correctly. But yeah, there's just a lot of cool aspects to it that
I think that's
are
one of the
lost
reasons they
nowadays.
used like the test pilot dudes, because they didn't seem to really care what happened at the end of the
Yeah,
day. Put me in the seat and
yeah,
point me in the right direction, and if I get out alive, I'll wave at the crowds.
yeah. No, it takes that's real bravery and courage right there for sure.
Yeah, right. I mean, there are two aspects to look at science fiction, I guess. You have the hard science aspect where, you want to make sure your math is right and your science is right, and you're right, and this thing is technically, have you read Seven Eves?
I have not read 70s. That's Neil's.
Oh, Neil Stevenson, I think his name is. Yeah. Oh my God, dude, it's so good. Highly recommend that book. And then you have the other side of the penny, like I would write, the soft science fiction, where you kind of gloss over the science. The science is there, and the science may or may not work, but yeah. Then you have the fantasy, I guess, aspect of science fiction, like the George Lucas would write. It's more, your sword and space type. Which do you think your novel falls in category wise?
Definitely softer. I mean,
Softer.
there's some things because I'm kind of establishing a world and trying to set things up for people. You kind of have to explain some things in terms of like where their food comes from, kind of what they do in their everyday, sort of how some of the aspect of the ship functions. But I tried not to get too technical. I'm not worried about like the air composition or the molecule composition of their air or exactly sort of how they produce a lot of things. A lot of that is kind of just supposed to be accepted for the story, right? But I've read a lot of I really liked a lot of Werner Vidge's stuff. I've read his stuff recently, and it's definitely the harder mode
Mm,
and just the way he's able to kind of use a lot of that harder aspects of the story, not so much to explain things, but to use it within the context of the story itself.
hmm
Is really interesting. I mean, a lot of those kind of golden age sci-fi writers they were like mathematicians and they were sort of people in their in very analytical fields. So you see that kind of stem into the fiction and the way they're able to not just use that to kind of make sure that, all right, if someone wants to fact check me on this kind of fact, then I'll be covered, which I feel like a lot of people do these days. They use that kind of hard sci-fi element a lot more to kind of propel an element of the story, or at least, infuse it into the story in some way instead of, trying to cover their backs, right?
Yeah, I hate those people that want to fact check. I just want to enjoy the story and think the author knows what he's talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, do you want to know where the food comes from and where the oxygen comes from?
Yeah.
Is it a spoiler to know whether they're humanoid, the people on the ship?
Uh, they're definitely humanoid, and again, that kind of dives into it in the novel itself. I mean, who they are, sort of what exactly they are, comes up a lot. But yeah, that would definitely get resolved by the end of the novel.
How do you feel about film, the science fiction that's coming out on the big screen nowadays?
I think it's really great. I mean, there's been a lot of really, really good stuff coming out recently. I have a lot of favorites just in the past couple of years. Interstellar is obviously a big one. I think Interstellar, despite
I
sort of,
love that. That was a good movie. Were you
yeah, I
happy
mean,
with it? 'Cause it's two camps. People hated it for some reason.
yeah.
They don't understand them, or us. I guess we kind of liked it. And it was interesting. I guess
Oh
it
no, like it
with
was definitely like it had a bit of camp to it. It had a bit of the ending was kind of weak, but I think like just a lot of
the
the
whole
information,
love is what keeps the universe afloat. Or what was the ending? It was love is what the community had that
like
work.
the concept that binds things together. Yeah,
Yeah, that was a
but I
little
thought
weak.
it had a really good concept. It had really cool like space visuals. It was kind of one
Yeah.
of the few movies that goes out there and does like risky space footage or kind of shows like a cool tension scene in space. I mean, there's a really cool scene in that movie that comes up anytime I hear the music. It's Hans Zimmer's "No Time for Caution." That scene
Mhm.
where they have to try to dock with a spinning spaceship.
Oh,
That's got
that
to
is
be
pretty
like
cool.
one of the most tense scenes of sci-fi I've ever seen. And I'll like just watch that on YouTube because I love that scene so much. And it's just like it's a. I think if we're talking about again hard sci-fi, it connects it in some way of like it's a scene of tension and action, but in a space that is like all about physics and making sure you're aligning things properly and making sure your momentum is sort of aligned. It's
Hmm.
a weird kind of untraditional action scene that's really cool.
No, that's a fantastic movie, and I do think that would get a lot more love if it wasn't for the love aspect in the end of it.
Yeah, yeah,
I wish that hadn't have been. I mean, does make me cringe a little bit. I wish it had been something a little bit more different, a little bit more not different, something I guess different. I'm going to throw that word out 4 times in a row. I
yeah.
wish it had been something different. I do.
Yeah, I think there's better ways you kind of got about it. Like I understand why Christopher Nolan went that way. You're obviously trying to go for an emotional punch, an emotional connection that ties off a lot of this technical kind of heady stuff. But I think there's better ways you could have gone about it. But I understand where he was coming from.
Hmm.
And the whole
And then
4D space.
Sunday, obviously, we've got Star Trek coming out.
Hey, Star Trek. Yeah, that
Discovery.
would be
Are you
really
gonna?
interesting.
Yeah, they're supposed to do anthologies though. I don't know how I feel about the continued series. They haven't really done much justice to Star Trek lately. Are you a fan of the movies, the new Trek direction?
I liked the first one was really good, and I thought Beyond Darkness and the other ones were kind of getting away from I guess what originally Star Trek is about. I understand they're going for that more action kind of mainstream storytelling, but I don't know if it kind of fits in that vehicle or not. But we'll have to see with the new series, especially. I understand that they're going to try to go for more maybe actiony kind of thriller stuff. So we'll see how well that fits in. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I really like the first movie, but yeah, the rest have been okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of J.J. Abrams. So I guess you're a big fan of the Star Wars too.
Star Wars was really
Nine.
cool. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited for this new one coming out this December. Rian
I've stayed
Johnson.
away from all of the marketing stuff.
Yeah.
I've
Oh,
stayed
I've been.
away from it completely. I don't know how excited I am. I watch it, I guess, and I'll notice that it's out, and I'll go, like, I'll get that bump in my chest. I'll go, oh, I'll go see it, and I'll get that
No,
like
I
that
think
little
the one
boy chill as soon as like the scroll starts. It's like, oh yeah, I'm watching Star Wars. Man, I was super excited about 8, 7. I was super excited about 7. I went with my kids, like they're infants, and I went with them and my wife, and we were sitting in the theater, and it started the scroll. I was like, oh yay! And I just realize that it'll never be the same. When I was a kid, I just watched them over and over and over again. They're for kids, right? I mean, that's basically what they are. They're sword in space, and they're made for children, and I'm an adult. Now, I never experience them like that again, but my kids will, and they'll love them.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that especially in the new one that came out, the Force Awakens. There's a lot of kind of kiddie stuff added in, little kind of comedic relief, but I mean, it still has a great central good story, and it's obviously more like fantasy than it is, or it's hard or soft sci-fi. But yeah, I think that they're taking it in an interesting direction now, and I want to see where they resolve it. So I may be an adult, but I'm interested in that kind of story arc kind of way, in terms of what do you do after sort of the original generation is gone, you're dealing with this new generation.
Oops,
What
hold on a
new
second.
paths
I
can you take
accidentally
on?
started a podcast. Okay, never mind. My phone is going crazy on me. There we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Hello? Can you hear me?
I am. Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
My laptop decided to take a ginormous poo on me, and I'm using my phone as a microphone.
No.
Yeah, it's horrible. I don't know what's happening. I've been spending like the last 2 weeks trying to reformat it. It's not wanting to work. My dump or what? Buy things at Best Buy. I just cannot. I can't deal with it. What's that?
Are you on Windows 10?
This laptop is on Windows 8.1.
Oh.
And it's one of those computers that they won't let you do anything with it. I can't remove the battery.
Right.
It won't. The drivers won't let you go to Windows 7. And I think the hard drive, I decided, I don't know. I'll build my laptop. I did it before, actually. Not 100% on that. Where were my favorite?
Sorry, repeat that. You're coming through a bit.
Oh, I apologize. We were talking about Star Trek and Star Wars. You're a fan of the Star Wars.
Star Wars more so, for sure.
Oh, I love Star Wars. Yeah. Oh, you're a bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. I say, excuse me. I would say I like them both, but I prefer the world of Star Trek. I like the optimism. I like the world they've developed through, the tech, and it just feels immense, and it's ours. It's our future potentially. And I don't think like Star Trek they would elect a Donald Trump.
You have to go through a Donald Trump before you get to a Star Trek. I think that's the real thing, is you have to realize how low you can go before you reach that sort of utopia, right?
I don't know. He seems like the type of guy. He seems like a troll. You know what I mean? He's the type of guy that you elect, and he leans one way, so you pull the other. That he wants you to pull, and I don't know what the future is going to entail for us. You seem to have a fantastic prime minister who's very liberal, and you guys are faring really well.
Yeah, I mean, he's good at his image. He's got great image, but I think policy-wise, there's some things he could be doing a bit better. I'm obviously like a very kind of left-leaning guy, and don't always agree with him, but I mean, comparably, he's doing all right.
So, what is your plan with the novel? What are you going to do? It's coming out. You've got 37. You've sold 36 copies. Wow, that's pretty impressive. Have you done any marketing, or is this friends and family? How have you sold 36 copies?
I got a couple places I've been seeing it, and that's the big sort of push now is trying to market it in new places, or trying to find new places, kind of get eyes on it. Because I am reaching that limit of friends and family kind of invested. I've gotten other orders here and there just from random people, and that's all helped really well. But yeah, now is at the point where I'm grinding up to those kind of, trying to get into that top 3, but just trying to find new places to market it. So I've used a lot of like I've been on forums, social media, those kind of ways. Reddit was kind of another one I was putting out there, and it's always hard to say how much
Work
that
out for
converts
you.
into sales. Yeah,
How
but
did Reddit work out for you? Did you get a
I'm
lot
not quite
of
sure. Didn't get any replies on it, and I don't know if it converted into any sales, but it's always hard to say because like if you get an order from names you don't recognize, it's like did you receive it from this site or that site? So you just gotta keep putting it out there, keep trying as much as you can, and hope someone kind of connects with it, I guess.
Reddit is fantastic if you establish yourself in the community.
Hmm.
It seems like if you can get yourself out there and constantly put your username into situations where you start getting recognized, then maybe you can translate that to sales. But just to throw your name occasionally or at something and then disappear, it's not going to ever translate into sales. You'll just be, one and done type situation.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
about Twitter?
Twitter I use a lot. I've been advertising on Twitter as well, and I'll definitely make like a bigger push and like more frequent posting kind of as it comes down to the deadline. But yeah, I'm just right now for Twitter, it's more so just trying to get posts out there at sort of convenient times when people see them.
I wanted to ask you a question about your Twitter. I just, I followed you before I started uh, the podcast. One of your tweets was about stuck in the door.
Yes, the old Counter-Strike video.
Does that have something to do with you, or are you just retweeting that from back in the day?
No, just back. I just remember when that came out. I was a big like Counter-Strike player back in the day, so I laughed at the
Okay.
video a lot. I love that video. It's so funny.
That was hilarious. I watched that 35-second video, cracked up. I thought that was funny. I like stuff like that. I don't ever play that type of game, unfortunately. I was like one of those playing WoW players, EverQuest type person.
Oh yeah. I was big into
Do you
EVE
still
Online.
game?
EVE Online was like going, touching on the sci-fi stuff. EVE Online was the best MMO. I thought like it was amazing. Everyone was
Do
playing
you
WoW, and I
play?
was playing EVE Online.
You do play still?
No, not these days. It takes a lot of attention. You need to like be on the game a lot to really get the most out of it.
Yeah, Eve was how they had a huge cost to entry. You had to spend a lot of time to play Eve online.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a 14-day trial. I got on, ship all deck, and lost it.
That's par for the course. Yeah. I think
tried it and
I think they've made the new player experience a bit better these days. But yeah, when I started playing it, it would take you like 2 or 3 months to get into a character or to develop your character into anything that could actually fly ships well or shoot other people down, which is
man, no,
ridiculous.
I lost the ship. I couldn't even figure out where I was in the game. I just figured out how to get back to where I jumped a few times, and then I kept jumping, and I was like, okay, I'm done, and I went back to EverQuest. So I've done that a few times actually. EverQuest, I lost my first character. I didn't know you could turn the lighting up in the game, and I fell someplace, the newbie area, and that was it for that character. I started a new one. I got jumped at the graveyard. They kept jumping me over and over and over again. I stopped playing that game. I was very good at losing new characters. Hold on a sec. Don't know how I like role-playing games.
Did you play on like a permanent server?
What, on EverQuest?
Yeah.
Oh, on Eve?
No, on EverQuest, losing characters.
No, no. My first character was like a level 1. I mean, obviously, you don't even lose experience for a level 1. My what is it called? The lighting was so low on the screen. I was so dumb that I didn't know how to turn the what is it called? Not the lighting, but the so my brain is so fevered I can't even think what it is. Game lighting, what's
Like
it called, man?
gamma or contrast or something like that.
the gamma. It was so low. Everything was dark, and I like fell behind some stairs or something. I couldn't figure out how to get out from behind the stupid
Yeah,
stairs.
just trapped forever.
So I was just trapped forever behind some stairs or something, and had to start a new character.
Still trapped there to this day. Yeah.
Probably, I never went back into that character. And then, I didn't play for like weeks. I was so frustrated. I started another character and random named it. Actually, maxed out that character's levels to like 70 or something. Was on a raiding guild. That's how good I was at 70.
Nice.
Some dude messaged me and said, "Hey man, you know that your name means a noob, right?" I was devastated. My name was AANOB.
I knew.
Devastated. Devastated.
But I'm level 70. I can't be a
I was
noob.
devastated. I'm level 70. I'm in a raiding guild. I can't be a noob. Anyway, so you don't game at all now.
No, I mean I still game. I just here and there. More so like Battlegrounds is what I'm into these days, or like Overwatch is still good. Destiny 2 looks pretty cool. I've been waiting for that big sci-fi game to come sweep me off my feet. So Destiny 2 might be it. We'll see.
It already came out. What was it called? Playing it for a minute. I downloaded it. Oh God. To do more thinking, I can't think of anything. I can't remember what this game was called.
Was it a recent game?
Yeah, last year. Right now. I'm actually kidding. It was horrible when it first came out. Everybody was making fun of it. It was supposed to be like the game to play. Open world, spaceships, mining. Supposed to have all type. No world was going to be the same.
Oh, you're thinking of No Man's Sky is what you're thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so bad. It was fun for like a second, and it turned out to be a joke and a half.
Yeah, I almost jumped into that, and I was worried because just the alarm bells were going off my head watching that game. I was like, see all the promotions. I'm like, okay, this looks too good to be true. There's no way. So I waited a bit, and then yeah, pretty much on release day, those first couple of days after it got released, all these stories came out about how fake it was, or how a lot of the things they promised weren't there. And I was quite surprised at how much was lacking from it. It seemed like a good game, and it produces a lot of cool screenshots and it's got good visuals, but I was surprised how much or how little of the game there was in it. Really, it's a lot of collecting. It's a lot of just crafting. I guess that whole
Pretty
scavenging.
interesting.
I'm not interested in that.
There was just nothing in it. I mean, that's all you did was just and die, and
I was
there was a lot of
surprised at the
redundancy.
brazenness of it, like how brazen their advertising was compared to the actual product. Like they spoke about things like over the moon, just like these huge monsters you can count, like you can meet other people, you can battle, and all these things. Like all these promises that weren't there on like launch days. Like how do you make that promise? It's weird.
Though, because it did kind of hook on to something that people want. People do want a game like that, just for something more. World science fiction role-playing game that doesn't really exist. Kind of Eve, but not Eve. And there's another game that's like that, kind of a role-playing game that promised forever, and I don't know if it's been released or not. And I'm horrible with names, so you're gonna have to pull it out too. 'Cause what is it called? There's this huge spaceship game they gained like $1 billion off of.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're thinking of Star Citizen, is what you're talking about, where they're essentially able to like charge people for ships that don't exist yet. Yeah, that one's amazing.
That's good. It's actually good.
I haven't seen. I mean, they've released videos. It looks pretty nice. I mean, what they're promising, it looks like it may be almost too rigid or realistic for what it is to be any enjoyable. But I'm interested to see where that goes if they follow through. Another one is Elite Dangerous, is a pretty good space game. But like I totally agree. I think there's a big space right now for, I guess, space games, right? People are interested in that, and it provides a lot of opportunities to like give people just infinite amount of room to work with. And if you can create a game where you could like fly your spaceship around, go seamlessly down to a planet, build a colony, fend off attacks from other players. Like I would totally be into that. That would be my perfect game.
Quest, right? Quest, gather resources.
Yeah. If it had the sort of player intrigue of combined with like the No Man's Sky element of base building and sort of flying around. I mean, if they just that's what I'm really wanting nowadays in my games. I want that sort of extra layer of, okay, this game's cool, but where's the sort of competitive to this, or where's the sort of player intrigue? And like EVE Online spoiled me a lot for that because there's so much like politics and so much player intrigue in that game that nothing has really like matched that environment since.
Away from Eve, was it just a time sink, or was there more? But did you just get bored with it?
No, I mean Eve was really interesting just because there was a lot of it had this whole metagame above the game itself of just again player politics, and like there were wars and you had to like defend your base against people coming to attack you. And I was involved in sort of a lot of kind of different conflicts that went on in that game, and to like be involved in that and like to organize with people in that sort of capacity. I really want that again in some game, maybe in a smaller way, but just nothing is really matched up to that level of organization and sort of like feeling like you have something to lose in a game, right?
Yeah, you do lose stuff in that game. Actually, you can get robbed, and if you
Oh yeah,
lose your battle,
yeah, and it's more so like
yeah,
when you're working on like the corporation level, like the guilds of the game and the alliances. When you're working on that level, it's how they call it, but yeah, when you're working at that alliance level, it is such a more intense experience. Excuse me.
no problem. So, what moved your life away from Eve?
Sorry, second.
No, what moved you away from Eve then?
Just it was too much of a time sink for sure. It was essentially like
Yeah.
a second job. You had to really keep up with it. So just kind of lost interest. I go back to it every so often. I log it and see how things are, but I haven't committed to it since. So
It's funny though. It's like a choice. You either have a job and you write, or you have a game. You have a job and you game. You know what I mean? You have a life and you game, or you have a life and you game, or you write. You're doing Inkshares. The novel is on its way out. Explain to me what Inkshares does exactly. You're doing 30. You have 30 sales. What is the goal that you're aiming for?
yeah, so the goal is to get into top three, and I think top three right now is just under 40. So like I'm within shooting distance, but Inkshare is a really interesting site because they just it's like one of those alternate kind of publishing methods, right? Because so much of like the publishing world nowadays, trying to get your work out there as a new writer, you're still kind of very much involved with either sort of traditional agents or traditional publishing, or obviously there's a self-publishing route with Amazon, which is always interesting but not always successful. But then this Inkshares is kind of like a third platform, and there's other sites like Inkshares that do the same thing. But Inkshares, I think, is the most mainstream or popular, maybe besides Wattpad. But yeah, Inkshares is like they hold contests and they give you a platform to essentially put your work out there, and if you get enough pre-orders on your book, then they'll publish it for you and they'll put it out there to mainstream shops and stores like Barnes and Nobles. I think is one. They have a couple other partnerships, but the thing with the contest is you don't necessarily, for most books you have to meet a pre-order limit of like I think it's 750 or 250, something like that. But in the contest, you don't have to meet that limit. You only have to get within the top ranks of the contest to really get that publication. So they have like a regular launchpad contest, which is just like open to anything. If you want to put your novel out there and try to get to the top, good luck. And then they have this horror contest one, which is more specific just to the horror genre. As long as that whatever form that horror is, and you can put your work on there, and it's less populated, and it seems like it's a smaller margin at the top between them. I think like the top one right now has 60 some orders, and the second person has maybe 50 some. So it's not that crazy. It's not hard to get to the top as long as you can build that sort of momentum of pre-orders.
Done Wattpad. I wasn't impressed at all. And I've heard a lot about Inkshare. Wattpad's filled with romance novels. It seems like
Yeah,
in fiction.
that's the impression I got. It was a lot more YA and in romance for sure. And romance, I mean, I don't want to disparage that. Like I know a lot of people who do a lot of romance and make bank on that, and it's very
Bank,
popular.
yeah, it's
Very,
like
very popular.
people love their romance. People
Oh
love
yeah,
it. If they love the romance, they love the romance. And people love the romance.
it's just a weird thing where it's like, yeah, it's like,
Fantasy and sci-fi, yeah.
yeah. I mean, all the other genres do well, but for some reason, like romance in particular does really well online in those Amazon self-publishing spaces. And again, like I know people who just turn out a romance or erotica novel in like 2 months, and then they're as long as they do that every 2 months, they can make like a solid income. Like I'm very impressed by it.
Yeah, I can't write that stuff though. I mean, have you ever thought about maybe throwing down? I did put 5,000 words into a romance story, and it turned out to be more of a lit story about an obese woman looking for love. That's not what they want to read. I
I don't know.
decided
There's a lot
to
of
put that
interesting.
away.
It's a deep world to get into for sure. I mean, I've definitely
No,
thought about it in terms of like putting on a pen name and just throwing some stuff out there, see what sticks. But yeah,
they
there's
want to
a
read about pirates and kidnap ladies and stuff.
yeah. Well, I mean that works. You could do like a romance novel of a pirate and a kidnapped lady. That there's definitely a subgenre of romance for that. There's a subgenre of romance
That's
for
why
everything.
I just wrote like 20 words. I just need like 40,000 more. I'm good to go.
It writes itself, really, that story. So you don't have to worry about
That's true. That is very true. I get the rest of my evening planned.
it. You always need a side project, right? You always work on your main thing, but the side pirate kidnap woman project, hey, you always got that.
Oh man, mama me, dude. I've already got like 60,000 words of it written, and I don't even have an end. I do have an ending. I just haven't gotten there yet. So, I mean, how do you get 250 sales though on Inkpad? I mean, these people have already like fans book. I mean, is it just luck? Is it just like go from 30 to 250? Seems like a miracle, or is
Yeah.
it not a miracle?
I mean, I think it's definitely for people who have like an established sort of small following around them, and then you can sort of build up additional sales from just marketing. Uh, yeah, I definitely think well, people who will have success in that platform in terms of just the traditional pre-order kind of method they do outside the contest is to have a platform beforehand, is to have sort of multiple stories published in magazines and shorts, or be known in sort of your local
Yeah,
writing community.
that's totally where I'm at right now too. Get
Yeah,
stories published in magazines. They
yeah,
have the readership. They're doing the work for you. They're doing the fundraising. They're getting their name out there. All you gotta do is publish short stories. Are you working on short stories at all? At all?
yeah. I mean, and that's the problem right now is I maybe have my hands in too many things. I'm trying to do maybe too many things at once. So I mean, I have like a short series that's going on. I really just put those out there just because they're more experimental and I just want to kind of produce. And then I am sort of writing other stories that are taking a bit longer. I'm giving them a bit more shine, but I do want to sort of get out there to magazines, within the next couple of months. So that's kind of moving along, and then I'm obviously having to work on sort of Stellar Drift at the same time. So that's the thing about writing these days is you really can't have a solid one idea and expect to sort of ride that. You have to have many ideas, and you have to keep
Yeah,
producing, and you have to hit every stream you can because yeah, your name isn't going to get there any other way.
yeah. I talked to an old writing professor of mine, and he says just you get it back rejected, work on it, polish it some more, send it right back out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Constantly have things sent out. I mean, you're not going to know if it's going to get rejected until it gets rejected. He said, in fact, if you look back through my podcast, earlier ones,
Mm.
notes, he has an anthology, and every single piece that's in the anthology published in the magazine.
Yeah.
Wheezing in your ear, but hold on a second. Sorry about that. Has been published in a magazine or some kind of anthology itself.
Yeah.
And he shows me in the notes, he shows me every time that it's been rejected. get rejected like dozens of times before it was
Oh, okay,
published.
cool.
Painful, number of rejections. I'm certain to myself. I mean, I'm going through my collection and just picking a story out and just polishing the living crap out of it, sending it out. Exactly what you just said I can do.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing is that it's great to get out there and try to get in those magazines, and you get rejected, a lot. There's a lot of that. At least it's easier these days because you can submit online. You don't have to like put your story in in an envelope, mail it, wait 3 months to get a response. It is a faster process now. But
Yeah.
but the downside to that is that these magazines, they get so many submissions, right? Now I was just reading just recently actually, what magazine was it? It wasn't, it might have been Strange Horizons or it might have been someone else, but it was just an editor with his magazine talking about how, we do a lot of, acceptances, we do a lot of buys, but we do way more rejections, and we do way more rejections of great stories, right? We receive 1,000 stories every month. We only publish maybe 3 to 5, but we'll receive 50 great stories that are totally publishable in the magazine, right? But we can only choose 3 to 5 of those 50. And so that's what's crazy is that you could submit a story these days, it get rejected, and you don't really, it's hard to get a sense of, is this a good story? Is there something I need to change? Like, is my getting rejected just because they can't publish it? Or, it's harder to tell these days. And it's nice when you get feedback on those elements from whoever you submit it to, but it's understanding that they can't always do that as well.
I won't give you feedback at all.
Feedback is the number one thing. It's like gold. It's like gold in the writing profession. Feedback is the number one thing every writer needs, and there's never not enough of it. Essentially.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, and there's tons of us out there writing wise. What I think is most important is find people that you can with. Twitter is turning out to be a really great place to meet people.
Yep.
And there's tons of groups out there and just forming relationships. I mean, I don't know, maybe they've already done this. They've established relationships and read each other's stuff.
I mean, yeah, having community is very important in writing, especially because your writing can only get better if you bounce it off people and you sort of workshop with people. So being on the outside of like sort of creating writing programs or kind of those other kind of institutions, it's harder to find that community. But they exist out there. I mean, NaNoWriMo is a really good one. I met or was hanging out with the NaNoWriMo group that ended up sort of hanging out throughout the year back in Vancouver, and they were a really good writing group. And having that sort of space to sort of talk about writing and sort of motivate yourself into doing more writing, I mean, it's always beneficial. And then again, you have the sort of people to bounce ideas off of and sort of, have them take a look at manuscripts. So I've had that in the past. I don't know if I necessarily have it here in Toronto just yet, but you're always trying to look out and try to make
it really hard.
Yeah,
it's really hard in person. I've been using the crap out of Reddit. I've been using the crap. I love Reddit for it. Now you have the writing prompt subreddit, which is fantastic. Find a prompt, write a story, people will respond to it. Or, you know what I mean? But you're writing, and you could take that prompt, you could take that story, and work it, and you have a story. You could send it out, maybe.
Yeah.
The
Reddit
science, the science fiction writing subreddit that we found each other on. They've stopped doing this as much. I think I broke it. I'm blaming myself, unfortunately. I think I did. I was submitting stories, and I was constantly every month I was getting the most votes, and I won one, and then they stopped submitting them. They stopped doing the challenges. I lost last month, just barely, like by like 2 or 3 votes, and they didn't submit another one this month. So it's frustrating, but I think hopefully now they've just changed it to every other month or something. But that one and fantasy writing, they're fantastic. Every month, fantasy writing does another challenge. They got the moderators doing a Robert Howard and a H.P. Lovecraft blended fantasy story. So I mean, there'll be like 50 people, or not 50, like 20 people that are submit a story, and you read, they say what they like, they don't read it, they don't say anything, they vote, somebody will win it, but you're getting your username out there.
Yeah, I mean,
At the same time,
especially
you
like
might be
Reddit,
fun.
especially, it's all about consistency. You just have to be consistently getting your name out there, so consistently posting
Mhm.
and yeah, being recognized. And you could certainly build up a decent following from there. I really like sci-fi writing. I think they do a lot of good things there. Like you mentioned, the challenges. I really like seeing people post their work there and sort of providing feedback. So I've done a couple sort of critique posts where I'll read some work
I've never done that.
and gives people some
I've
highlights.
never asked for critiques, and I don't really give critiques either, unfortunately, 'cause I don't like. Excuse me.
But I mean, a lot of the
But I have
critiques,
noticed that.
it's more so like if you see someone out there who's like new, I really like to sort of help like people who are obviously sort of newer
Mhm.
and giving them a lot of sort of the basic pointers that I collected over the years, but people didn't necessarily tell me. So it's just like like using less commas, being less passive in the wording, just all these sort of basic tenets that every new writer kind of packs into their work, but you need to remove before you can get anywhere good. I just try to kind of unload people with that advice.
I tend to rewrite their story like I want my story to sound, and that's not good. Never let a frustrated writer critique your work, because they're just going to make it sound like they want their story to sound.
Yeah, they'll just make it theirs essentially.
Exactly. So I stay away from everybody's now. I don't want to critique Andy's work. Oh, I've got a cough again. Hold on a second. So we're working on about an hour. I think I started this timer a little bit late. I gotta say, man, I really appreciate you joining me today.
No, thanks for
It was
having me. It's
a fantastic conversation. I think we hit on all. I don't know. I ramble, and the conversation goes all over the place, and I love it. But sometimes my guests are like, "Dude, what are we even talking about?" But and plus, I was kind of sick, so I kind of feel bad about that too. Did you want to hit on anything that we didn't talk about that you thought that we might have should have hit on?
No, I mean, I think we got everything I wanted to really talk about. I mean, again, a big buff of sci-fi, all those, just any sort of tough sci-fi topic, I love to dish on. And yeah, I mean, specific for this podcast, I think we got into the whole publishing platforms. That was kind of really what I wanted to talk about, which is that kind of getting out there as a new writer and kind of advertising yourself. And we touched on that as well. So no, I'm feeling very happy.
But to finish this off, I asked 3 questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead. The first one being, we are approached on one of those new writers that you critique. If they ask you for advice about, how to stick to it or how to come out of a slump, what kind of advice would you give them?
Coming out of a slump, writer's block, anything that's like stopping you from working, the number one solution to that is always like reading good work, like just going out there, finding something new. If you're reading a novel right now and you're in a slump, like try a different novel. Just like go to something else or try reading some short fiction online or something. Like I think always reading will propel you into writing. I think there's that quote of Hemingway about writing being a well and all that stuff. I think you definitely need to read to sort of propel yourself into writing. So I would always vibe that, and then read a good book, get a large coffee, and then just sit down and sort of force yourself to do it. You can't be distracted. You can't do anything else. You just kind of have to write something. As long as you're writing something, it's better than writing nothing, even if it's bad.
My second question is, what are you reading right now?
Oh boy, I just finished. I'm actually reading right now Dubliners by James Joyce because I've never read that.
Oh,
So
wow, man, you're a brave guy.
yeah, I'm going. So I'm diving back into that. It's just classics I haven't read before. Just trying to understand that. My previous one I read was what was it? It was Burning Chrome, William Gibson's short anthology. He has a lot of great short stories in that. It's like his early work, and it's a collection of his short stories there, and it's a lot of good ones that still stand up today. And I
Is it
never got a
called
chance to
Burning
read a lot of that old stuff.
Crows?
Sorry, Burning Chrome is what it's called. Chrome, Chrome.
Oh, okay.
It's a
Interesting.
really really good from the early or late 80s, I guess. And the next one I have lined up,
And man,
I actually want to go back into Hitchhiker's Guide for the Galaxy. I think that's the next one I got lined up.
oh,
We'll get back in some humor sci-fi.
classic.
Yeah, love that one.
Always makes me sad. He's 9 years older than I am. Died. It's like, man, how to die when you're 40 years old?
Hmm.
And walking out of a gym too is like, man, you just can't win.
No, I remember
Brian,
hearing of him passing. It was very sad. Yeah, definitely should have
yeah,
lived longer.
love to give him 3 great books. Question: where can we find you?
Where can you find me? Yeah, you can find me online. You can go to Twitter at Great Void. I'm also at Ultra Void on Medium. There's a lot of my short fiction there. I got an ongoing series. And then obviously, if you go on Inkshares, you can find me at Stellar Drift, and that's my novel, which you should pre-order. It's gonna be good. I can promise that.
Are you planning? Are you just going to do a traditionally published work, or are you thinking about maybe potentially doing indie publishing if Inkshares doesn't work out?
I really
Or you
like
go back to
Inkshares
the
to work out.
drawing board?
Yeah, I mean, if Inkshares doesn't work out, I'm going to get the manuscript all completed. I'm going to wrap that up. I'm going to set aside for maybe a couple months, then come back to it. Maybe self-publish. Maybe at that point try to get an agent, because I think that's the next step, at least for me, is to either find an agent or sort of get into that space of traditional publishing. So yeah, if Inkshare doesn't work out, I think that's the plan: is put it aside for a bit, come back to it, and then maybe try that traditional publishing method.